I've been able to help a lot of people purchase a new construction home. Through that process, I've learned a lot. My clients have learned a lot, and there's a lot of fees that a lot of people just don't think about. There's things that you're going to need to know and want to know if you're going to purchase a new construction home. Hi, I'm Evan Whaley, your favorite Greenville realtor. Let's talk about some of these fees that you might not think about whenever you're purchasing a new construction home. These could come in at several different points in the process. Let's start at the very beginning. So whenever you're getting ready to sign on that contract with that builder, a couple things that you want to know about that are potentially higher cost items than if you were to purchase in the resale market. Let's start before you actually sign on the dotted line. A couple things that are some fees that you might not think about if you're just looking on the website, looking at a new construction home. One of the first things is a lot of builders, especially here in Greenville County, will charge what they call a lot premium. This is, you're in their community, they've got 200 lots, but these 50 or 100 or sometimes even like 180 of the 200, they consider to be a premium for some reason, whether it's in a cul-de-sac or whether it's a more level lot, whatever the case may be, they're going to charge a higher amount for that specific lot. So that base price that you're seeing has already gone up anywhere from what I typically see, somewhere between $5,000 all the way up to $35,000, $40,000 above just for the particular lot that you want. Second thing, and I find a lot of people typically know this, but the upgrades. How much you actually going to pay in upgrades? I find that a lot of my clients, whenever they're purchasing new construction homes, will think that they're not going to spend a whole lot of extra money on upgrades. Sometimes that's true and other times it's not at all. I find this really depends on the builder and the community. It's really important that you figure out when you're in that process and you're walking through that model home. Typically that model home has just about every upgrade that the builder offers. So just find out specifically what in here is upgraded, what's not. And I highly recommend hiring representation. Hire a buyer's agent to help you through the process. Number 3, this is something that a lot of people don't always think about, is the deposits tend to be higher on new construction than if you were to buy a home like in the resale market. So that deposit that you put down typically is somewhere from what I find, anywhere from about 3 all the way up to about 10% of the purchase price of the home, depending on the amount of upgrades and customization and who the builder actually is. So you're going to typically put down more on new construction. So just know that. The builders want to make sure that you're serious and that you're committed to buying this new construction home. Another thing just to note is all builders typically will use their own specific contract that they have their own attorneys write up. So every contract that I've seen from a builder has their own different nuances and caveats to them. So you really want to make sure you know exactly what you're reading through when you're looking at a 30-page contract, so you know what you're signing on the dotted line for. And again, that's another reason why I'd highly recommend getting some representation in new construction. Now, you've already signed the contract, you're committed to working with this builder, you've put down your deposit. What are some other things that you potentially need to think about? One of the biggest mistakes that I see people make when they purchase new construction is not doing their own private inspection. Now, the county code inspectors, of course, are going to do a great job. There's requirements and regulations that have to be met, but that private inspector is going to spend a significant amount of time in that house, 3, 4, 5 hours, looking it up head to toe to make sure you're not going to have any potential issues. I typically recommend inspections in 2 phases. If you're building from the ground up, you want to check and do a pre-drywall inspection. This is to make sure that the framing and all the components of the house are really put together well. The second is after the construction process has been completed. You want to have that done normally a couple weeks before closing so you can hand everything over to the builder and get all of those things rectified and finished and done before you close on the property. All builders are going to offer a warranty, and most of them, I think, try to do a good job to get out there quickly. But let's face it, they're so busy building all these other new homes that they might not show up in 24 hours, and that could be a big deal. You might have a dishwasher that's not functioning properly, and had you have done that inspection, you would have found that out beforehand. So I highly recommend, again, doing both of those inspections. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is that most builders are going to charge a change fee if they'll even allow you to make any changes whatsoever on the production build side for any changes that you're going to make in the process. Because of the supply chain issue that we had back in 2020 and 2021, a lot of builders have basically just started, hey, this is what you're going to get. They're going to pre-order everything and we're going to have it all ready to go. That has limited the amount of changes that most buyers are allowed to make in the construction process. It's typically resulted in higher change fees when they can make those changes. From a builder's perspective, again, they've already ordered everything, they've already planned for it. So for them to change something during the middle of the build, Typically, it's a little bit of a cumbersome process. You just want to make sure and you want to know, can you make any changes? If you do, what are the changes you can make? When's the drop dead date that you can make those changes? And so many other things, if that's going to be something that's important to you. And typically I have found when people are building from the ground up, a couple things just tend to change along the way, whether that's your own personal style or when you start to see things come together. There's a couple things that you feel like, oh, I really would rather have this than that. So just keep that in mind. You're really going to want to know if you can make those changes and what would be the process to do so. Now, as we're getting closer to the closing table, there are several fees that you're going to want to know about and some things that I find that people don't really think about as much. Let's start with the one that tends to be one of the highest dollar figures that is on that settlement statement. That's actually for the transfer and deed stamp fee. Typically in South Carolina, the seller pays for the transfer and deed stamps. Our resale contract actually states that in the contract unless it's stated otherwise. Well, since the builders are writing their own contracts and because they're doing so many sales, they charge that specific fee to the buyer in most cases. This is actually a $3.70 fee for every $1,000 of the purchase price. And that ends up getting put on the buyer side of the settlement statement. So this could be multiple thousands of dollars in fees depending on the purchase price of the home that you end up going with. The good news is in new construction, what I've seen recently is builders are offering pretty large closing cost incentives, so it's covering that fee among several others. But depending on when you're watching this video, that may not be the case. It's just something that you're going to want to know about because it could be extra money out of your pocket that you might not have been expecting. Another expense that buyers don't always think about is an HOA transfer fee. I've been seeing that more and more common over the last few years here with new communities that are started. This is an initiation fee and a change fee from one owner to the other for the HOA. Now, this is not something that people always love. I find that this is normally a fee somewhere between $250 up to about $850, and it's a one-time fee. A lot of people feel like this is just kind of one of those junk fees that are thrown in there, and in some cases it can be, but one of the benefits, it's something that's actually positive for this, is the HOA actually has to collect funds so that if anything actually happens, especially if you're in a community that has a playground or a pool or whatever the case may be, and they need to do repairs, they need to have funds sitting there that they can actually take care of that repair and maintenance item. The vast majority of HOAs have common spaces and all of these other things that they have to take care of, so they do need money to operate and keep the community in good shape. And this leads me down to my next point. One thing to pay attention to is if your community is not charging that HOA initiation fee, is to make sure that you know what those HOA fees are going to be monthly or yearly, and you make sure that you have some understanding of what the covenants for the neighborhood says as far as how much they can actually go up yearly, quarterly, or whatever the case may be. You don't want to start off with a fee that's somewhere around $400 a year and then all of a sudden the next year it goes up to $600. Most covenants have something written in them that you can only go up by a certain percentage, and I have seen that be very, very rare here in Greenville that an HOA fee jumps up significantly. Normally it's just a small, teeny little incremental change, but if it's going to happen, typically it happens more in new construction communities when they just weren't prepared for a specific expense. Another thing to keep in mind is figuring out, is your builder going to manage the HOA? Are they going to manage it for a period of time or sell it to another company after a specific amount of time of holding on to the HOA? You're just going to know so you can know what kind of service you can get and know who you're going to be expected to reach out to. Another thing to really think about would be building delays. This is something that can cost you a significant amount of money. Of course, you're not paying that on the settlement statement, but you may have to move out of wherever you're renting or the place that you're selling earlier than anticipated and move your stuff into storage and get temporary housing. So it's just something to pay attention to, and it's really important for you to know how close the builder you're working with is to hitting their timelines. Some builders do a much better job at that than others, so you just want to know and get a good idea, is the timeline that you're being told realistic? Of course, there's a lot of things that are completely outside of the control of builders. When it came to the supply chain issue and they couldn't get a lot of the materials, that of course was completely out of their hand. And I have found that things recently have gotten a lot better, especially since they're pre-ordering things earlier and more ahead of schedule than what they typically do. Two other things to really pay attention to are the appliances and the blinds. Let's talk about the appliances. I typically find that a stove and a dishwasher is going to come with the place. Those are pretty much standard. They're going to be needed for your loan. But a refrigerator, a washer and dryer, those things are not standard, and you'll just want to know, because if you're expecting those to be in the house and you move in and they're not there, of course that can be several $1,000s of additional expenses you weren't prepared for. Then there's blinds. I always tell my clients to have a plan, whether you're having the builder put them in, whether we negotiate that with the builder, or you're having a third-party contractor come in the day of closing to install blinds. Unfortunately, so many people will buy a new construction home and not think about blinds or window treatments, and they'll move in and they'll just have the sun beaming right in their eyes all day, and they can't get the things done that they need to get done. And it ends up taking them some time to actually get that plan in place. So just think about that ahead of time so you don't have that issue. Another thing that I find is pretty important for a lot of buyers is the landscaping. Make sure you know what kind of landscaping your builder is going to do. Are they going to put down sod so that you'll have grass that you can walk on day one? Are they going to seed the area? Are they going to put straw out? What are they going to do? And when are they going to do it? And are they going to water it? And that brings up another great point. Will there be some kind of sprinkler system that you can use upon moving in? And how rooted is the grass going to be? I find that when people are really particular about the landscaping, that's something that they don't necessarily always think about when it comes to new construction, and something that can end up being a fairly large expense depending on what someone wants to do. Most new construction builders are going to do things that are going to meet the minimum of code, which typically means they're going to put a couple trees in, they'll put sod in the front yard, and then at that point, it really depends on the builder if they sod the backyard or if they seed in straw, or just what kind of happens there. So you really want to know specifically what's going to happen and what kind of landscaping you're going to get. That's something that's important to you. Another thing you're really going to want to find out is if your builder's putting gutters on the property. A lot of builders actually don't put gutters on the house. It's not a requirement. So make sure you know ahead of time. Are there going to be gutters? Because if not, you can end up spending over $1,000 at closing to put gutters on the property. One of my last points is really a catch-all, and there's so many other things that I can mention when it comes to new construction. Overall, I love new construction. I love helping people buy new construction. I love the warranties that are offered. I love a lot of the incentives that we're seeing out there in the market right now that make it really affordable for buyers, where they're lowering interest rates, they're paying for closing costs, and so many other things that I've talked about in previous videos. But these are just some of the things that you want to know about. There is no perfect option whenever you're purchasing a home where you're going to move in and have absolutely zero expenses. Unless you just aren't really particular, that's really not going to happen. The last thing I want to mention is that all builders have a little bit of a different process, and there's different things that I found with different builders that can be a hidden expense that you're not thinking about. A big area that I'll focus on is the garage, because I find there's so many different things that different builders do. Find out if they're going to finish the garage, if they're going to paint it, if it's just going to be sheetrock and mud. Find out if there will be actually a clicker that you can use to actually open that garage door opener if it's automatic. These are all things that I find that can be, smaller expenses, but they're still expenses in and of themselves, and there's things that you're going to want to know about. I hope this video was helpful for you. There's so many tips that I could continue going on and on for days, but these are some of my biggest ones when it comes to purchasing new construction. Like I've mentioned, purchasing new construction can be really fun, it can be really rewarding, and it can be a really great option for a lot of buyers. But just make sure you have the right representation. Have a buyer's agent that's representing your best needs, that truly knows the new construction world, so that they can help guide you through this process and make it as smooth as possible. If you have any questions about purchasing new construction here in Greenville County, please drop a comment down below, or you can reach out to me directly. All my contact information will be at the end of this video and in the description down below.